Today we're making this effect where we float an object in the air with this glowing aura and some magical particles. We start with two shots. This one with the floating object is filmed in front of a green screen to make isolating the object easier. I start by lining up the two shots so that the thumbs up at the end happens at the same time. After using the key light effect to key out my dumbbell shot, I noticed an issue. The hexagonal shape of the dumbbell is clear in the foreground, but part of the backside of the dumbbell is being covered by my wrist. This is only a problem for a small number of frames, so it might be something we have to do some manual work to fix. Since we have the footage green screened, using an animated mask to cut off my arm would work, but since I don't want to manually move a mask for so many frames, I decided to use the RotoBrush tool to do this. Every time after I RotoBrush a piece of footage, I set my work area to the length of that footage and hit Layer, Auto Trace. Auto tracing the alpha of the layer will basically take that RotoBrush effect and convert it into masks. The RotoBrush effect can be very slow when loading frames, so turning it into masks really speeds up my workflow. And we can use these masks for a later portion of this effect. It's always a good idea to save your project before auto tracing, because I find it can take some time for the software to respond and sometimes it just straight up crashes. Now that we have the basic floating dumbbell setup, I can fade back in the rest of the green screen footage at a low opacity right around when the thumbs up happens. Now to solve my issue of my wrist blocking the back end of the dumbbell, I took another layer of the footage, masked out my wrist in the approximate location and angle that the back hexagon would occupy, and then by tinting my wrist to be black and white and decreasing the exposure, I turned it dark enough to blend pretty well with the rest of the dumbbell, at least for the frames that we need it for. And when the footage is zoomed back out, it actually looks pretty natural. After doing this, I pre-composed those layers together and auto-traced them again so that my masks include this portion of the dumbbell. Then we can create a new solid layer and copy the auto-trace masks to it. We can then apply the Video Copilot Saber effect to this layer, with the core set to layer masks. From there you can select whichever preset gives you the kind of glow that you're looking for. Since I wanted the ghost version of myself to also glow, I also performed an auto trace on his layer, and did the same steps to apply a saber effect to his outline. At this point I switched my saber to the Patronus preset, and animated the core size of the glow to increase as my ghost fades in. To add some ghostly particles to the floating dumbbell, I added a layer with the Trapcode Particular effect, and loosely tracked the emitter position to the center of the dumbbell as it moves. Starting with the Particle Swarm preset, I increased the velocity of the particles, changed their color to match the Patronus glow, and added some air resistance and some spin amplitude. I then duplicated that system, but switched these particles to be much larger cloudlet particles, but with their opacity reduced all the way down to 0.5%, so that they give a really subtle cloudy airy effect. And that pretty much does it, the floating object with a ghostly glow and some magical particles. I've still got some more effects from the Muscle Mag video to break down, so stay tuned for those.